In this lecture we're going to talk about food and the way that food is used as a metaphor. Let's look at some of the key concepts to begin with. So we're going to talk about what is a metaphor, and then we're going to look at metaphors in terms of the target and the source domains. So the source domain is where do you get the metaphor from, and the target is the particular domain that is being applied to. We'll also talk about dead metaphors, and we'll also look at the notion of thought as food. Then we'll look at the number of food words to designate certain nationalities, and we can call that Gastro-nationalism. And then finally we'll look at the use of sexual metaphor and food, and especially the notion of woman as dessert. Okay, so what is a metaphor? Well, it's a figure of thought as well as a figure of speech. So language and thought are closely related. So one of the things that we often do in terms of language is we try to express our abstract ideas through reference to our own bodies. Okay, so have a look at the two pictures there. So here's Kyoto in Japan, and it lies in a valley. And in the second picture there, just in front of the Kyoto station, stands Kyoto Tower. So lies and stands are metaphors, and those metaphors have come from a source domain in terms of what we know about bodies, what we know about how bodies lie and how bodies stand. Okay, so metaphors are constrained and motivated by structures of our embodied experience, and these metaphors in turn constrain our reasoning. Here's another example. Think of a pot. Have a look at this pot. Notice how when we describe the parts of the pot, we are referring to often our own bodies. So a pot has a lip or a mouth, it has a neck, it has a belly, and it has legs, and there are many other words through which we refer to pots or shapes like this by reference to our own bodies. And this seems to be pretty universal across all languages. Okay, so let's look more at the notion of target and source domains. So a metaphor allows us to talk and think about one area of experience, and which is usually pretty abstract, in terms of another, which is concrete. Okay, so when we're describing the parts of a pot, which is really an abstract notion, we're referring to things which are concrete, like our own bodies. So the abstract experience is the target domain, and the concrete experience is the source domain. The conceptualization of a metaphor is a mapping. You're mapping from a concrete source domain to an abstract target domain. Often it's written like this in uppercase, argument is war. Okay, so argument is the target, and that's a very abstract notion of what an argument is, or to make an argument, is war, which is a very concrete source domain. And we can use some examples there. She attacked every weak point. Your arguments are indefensible. He won the debate. You might not notice, really, but those are all metaphors based upon a source domain, something concrete like conflict, like war, applied to an abstract area of having an argument. You may not notice that they are metaphors, and when you really don't notice them, they're called dead metaphors. Okay? So really successful metaphors die from being overused. They become so much a part of our culture that we cease to think of them as metaphors. And here's one example, a seminal idea. So the word seminal here is used metaphorically. Here's an example. Kandel was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2000 for his seminal observation that it was in the action of the synapses between cells that memory existed. So the word seminal has a figurative and a literal meaning. Figuratively, it means containing or contributing to the seeds of later development, creative or original. And that is derived from the source domain, the very concrete meaning of seminal, relating to or consisting of a seed or semen. When we look at other dead metaphors, we try and connect that with food, we come across this our interesting word, sweetheart, which we probably do not recognize as a metaphor. Well, in fact it is, and originally it referred to a sweet or sugar cake in the shape of a heart. Okay, so that was the source domain, the concrete domain, and then it was applied to the abstract idea of love. It was applied metaphorically to a lover. And you can see how we can get other words. We can get to tart, right? And we get there probably through some kind of rhyming slang, sweetheart, jam tart, and then dropping of the jam and tart. So a tart, of course, has a negative connotation as opposed to sweetheart. Let's look at the metaphor of thought as food, and this has been explored in a paper, and let's look at the way we can break this down. So we can break it down into four parts. So the content of thought is food. Here's some examples. Intellectual pap. Pap is worthless or oversimplified ideas or drivel. And pap or pabulum really is a soft, bland cereal, usually for kids. A bone of contention. That's tripe, meaning that's nonsense. There's no meat on that argument, or there's no meat in that argument. Milk toast, which actually comes from originally from a character called Caspar Milquetoast, which was written in the 1920s. Who was a very timid person, so we get the phrase milk toast. Okay. And of course, milk toast comes from the fact that you can have toast and then you can pour milk on it, hot milk on it, and it softens it. So it becomes something like pap. So that becomes applied as metaphorically to someone of unusually meek, bland, and soft or submissive characteristics. So that's a notion of the larger category of thought as food in terms of the content of thought is food. A second way of looking at that particular larger metaphor is the quality of thought is the taste and texture of food. So we can talk about, oh man, that's a sweet idea, or bitter words, pithy remarks. Remember the pith of an orange, for example. A meaty argument. It leaves a sour taste in my mouth. A juicy rumor, a delicious bit of gossip. So again, these are all metaphors derived from the source domain of the quality of thought is the taste and texture of food. Okay? So the taste and texture of food is used as the source domain, which is applied to thought, the quality of thought. A third area we can look at in terms of thought as food is the formation of thought, is the preparation of food. So half-baked ideas and warmed over theories. let the idea simmer on the back burner. Let him stew over that. Let that idea gel. Let that idea percolate for a while. The idea has been fermenting for years. So here you get the thought process, which is likened to the source domain of the preparation of food. And finally, the fourth area we can break down thought as food is the comprehension of thought, is the digestion of food. Okay, let me chew that idea over. The truth is hard to swallow. There's a lot for me to digest here. Here's a theory you can really sink your teeth into. She devoured the book. She's a voracious reader. We don't need to spoon feed our students. So here's the process of feeding and digestion is likened to the comprehension of thought. Okay, so again, the source domain is the way we digest and the way we eat our food, and it's applied to the target domain of the comprehension of thought. That particular framework came from a paper by Su, 2002, and she looked specifically at the use of metaphor and food, as thought in Chinese. So as you can see from her particular her framework there, those particular areas we've just looked at, content, quality, formation, and comprehension, can be related back to specific parts of speech. So content tends to be in terms of nouns. Quality tends to be in terms of flavor, in terms of adjectives, and formation, or the preparation of food, and the digestion of food also tend to be in both are in the form of verbs. And what she found when she looked at all the particular occurrences of metaphors in Chinese, that food and Chinese cuisine is held by many to be the best cuisine in the world. Food plays an important role in Chinese culture. So the use of food metaphors in Chinese is highly productive and diversified. And 92% of the metaphors in Chinese are concerned with flavor, okay, lots of adjectives, and digestion, okay, lots of verbs. So you can begin to think in terms of English and begin to maybe quantify just how important food metaphors are into food as thought as a metaphor is important in English. Probably not as important as Chinese, because maybe Chinese cooking, Chinese cuisine is a lot more important than British cuisine, American cuisine, or whatever English-speaking society you want to think of. Okay, so now when we're thinking of nations, of nationalities, a favorite way of referring to another nationality is through using particular food terms, and we can call this gastro-nationalism. So here's an example. The Americans use the word limey to refer to Brits, and that's a reference to the eating of limes by British sailors. And British sailors did that. They got the vitamin C and the good stuff out of the limes to counteract a particular disease which is prevalent when you don't have fresh food, called scurvy. So the practice of eating limes produces the naming of the people who eat the limes as limey. So that's a classic case of gastro-nationalism. And you can think of other particular names for other nationalities. The British have a name for the French, frogs, and you probably can think of many other ones as well. We can also think in terms of these larger brand names and brand images as kinds of metaphors. So, in a sense, Betty Crocker, who is on the left there, the typical middle-class cook, represented through images, and also look at also the brand name Aunt Jemima. Notice how Aunt Jemima has gone through quite a change from the days when she was a rather overweight mama to a person below who is probably looks like the neighbor of Betty Crocker. Okay, so let's go on now and look at sexual metaphors, and look at the metaphor of a woman as dessert. Okay, so woman is the target domain, and the source domain is dessert. And this is based on an article by Hines, which I'd like you to read. And what she's tried to do is trace a process where you begin with people as objects, and then it goes through a particular process, and we end up with desserts. And what she came up with was a series of names for dessert in terms of women. Okay, so a piece of cake. A piece of cake originally meant referring to a woman who of easy virtues. Okay, so a piece of cake meaning nowadays, and it's become a dead metaphor, means something that's easy. Originally was referring to a woman referred to by a man as someone who was easy, would give her favors as sexual favors easily. And then you can see lots of other desserts, plenty with certainly not the most negative connotations as tart, the one below there, but cookie, cupcake, a tasty bit of pastry, which is shortened really to a tasty bit, pumpkin, which is pretty innocuous, used for children. Cherry pie, there's a notion of cherry pie that we'll look at in a moment, the relation of cherry to vagina. A bit of crumpet, I think that's more like British English. And then we have tart, of course, which is very negative, and we saw how that was derived as kind of rhyming with sweetheart, jam tart, and then shortened to tart. So tart really is very similar to piece of cake, although piece of cake has lost the connotation as being a sexual metaphor. The other ones there, of course, Hines has ruled out because they're not really dessert. They're just cute names: honey pie, honey bunch, sweetie pie, cutie pie, muffin, tootsie or tootsie roll, which are not exactly desserts. Finally, we can look at how sexual organs are referred to metaphorically by reference to food. So we're talking about a vagina, but we're referring to it as the source domain as dessert. So at one stage or another, these have been used in various dialects to refer to vagina: cherry pie, niche, pink taco, split apricot, honey pot, cream pie, fica in Italian, which means fig, and there's a picture of a fig. So this is the way that we often go about language, is we talk about abstract ideas, or we talk about or refer to things which are kind of taboo by reference to particular more concrete or safe items like food. And just to finish off, we can also talk about the words that apply to penis. So some stage, in some cultures, these have been applied to the penis. Are sausage, salami, wiener, kielbasa, which is Polish, bratwurst, meat popsicle, meatsicle, meat puppet, bologna pony, hanging meat, and maybe you've got some other terms as well. So what we've seen is that metaphor is a way that allows people to talk about both abstract ideas and about particular taboo topics by reference to a concrete source domain.